Algebra 2, lesson 2.2c, graphing quadratics in x-intercept form. So x-intercept form of a quadratic is y is equal to a times x minus p and times x minus q. So the p and the q values are the x-intercepts of the quadratic, right? If you recall, x-intercepts tell you where the graph crosses the x-axis. Okay, so you notice right here where the graph crosses the x-axis, they are represented by the p and the q values. Okay, so the coordinates would be p comma 0, q comma 0. Okay. Now there's two really important things that you need to remember for this lesson. First of all, when you're trying to find p and q from x-intercept form, you have to remember to take the opposite signs. Okay, when we do an example in a moment, you guys will see what I mean. So just remember, when you're trying to find p and q from the equation, take the opposite signs of what's inside the parentheses. And then number two, the axis of symmetry. Now you notice if I draw an axis of symmetry here, right? The axis of symmetry here, it's halfway between p and q, right? So the axis of symmetry is halfway between p and q. That's an important concept to remember for this lesson. Okay, so let's take a look at an example now. All right, so number one here. So they want us to graph y equals -2 times x plus 3 times x minus 1. So like on a test, you would have to recognize, oh, this is x-intercept form. Okay, so if this is x-intercept form, that means that to find my p, I'm looking at this number here. To find my q, I'm looking at this number. But in order to find p and q, like I told you, you have to take the opposite signs. So p is actually -3 and q is actually +1. So you have to remember, when the equation is in x-intercept form and you're finding p and q, you have to take the opposite signs from what's inside the parentheses. So now that we have p and q, let's kind of make a little sketch, or a sketch of the graph. All right, so I want it to be dashed, I want it to be solid. So we know that the graph is going to cross through -3 and +1 on the x-axis, right? So here are our p and q values, okay? So now we found the x-intercepts. The next thing we need to find is, well, we need to find the vertex, okay? Well, like I told you, the axis of symmetry is halfway between the p and the q values. So this distance apart here, right? So from -3 to +1, right? This is 4 spaces apart, right? So that means that halfway, we move 2 spaces to the right from -3. This is going to be halfway. So that means that this is -2, -1. This means our axis of symmetry is at -1. And if you remember, the axis of symmetry is the same thing as the x value of the vertex. So that means that the x value of the vertex is going to be -1. Because the axis of symmetry, remember, it's the same thing, it's equal to the x value of the vertex. So we have the x value of the vertex, we need to find the y value. So just take the x, plug it into the equation. So y is equal to -2 times -1 plus 3 times -1 minus 1. So if we work all this out, -2 times +2 times -2. So we end up with y is equal to 8. So we know our vertex is -1, 8. Let's say 8 is up here. So right here, I know there's my vertex. Okay. Now the a value, remember this is the a value. We know a is equal to -2. So we know the parabola is going to open down. The parabola is going to open down, go through our x-intercepts. Right? And everything makes sense, right? A is negative, so we know the parabola should be opening down. And then let's label everything. So first of all, let's label our x-intercepts. So this would be -3, 0. This would be +1, 0 for our x-intercepts. Our vertex, we know, is -1, 8. And the axis of symmetry, we know the equation is x is equal to -1. Okay? Okay, let's take a look at number 2 here now. All right, so number 2, we have, it tells us to graph f of x. Now, when you see f of x, remember this means the same thing as y, so don't let that fool you. So f of x equals negative parentheses x plus 1 times x plus 5. So once again, we have x-intercept form, so we know to find the p and the q values, right? So we're going to do opposite, so p is going to be -1. Q would do opposite of +5, so that's -5. Once you have your p and q values, let's make a sketch, right? So we have -5 and -1, right? So here are our x-intercepts at -5 and -1. Now once again, we know that the axis of symmetry is going to be halfway. So once again, it looks like it's going to be between -5 and -1. That's 4 spaces, right? So that means the axis of symmetry, if we move 2 spaces to the right of -5, so let's say 1, 2, so that'll be -4, -3. So this is where the axis of symmetry would be. So since we know the axis of symmetry, right, the equation is going to be x equals -3, that means that our x value of our vertex, right, so the vertex, the x value of the vertex is the same as the axis of symmetry, so -3. And then to find the y value of the vertex, we just plug it in the equation. So we have f of -3, right? This just means we're plugging in -3 into our equation. So we have negative parentheses -3 plus 1 times -3 plus 5. And we work it out. Negative parentheses -2 times 2. So we end up with 4. Okay. So we know our vertex is -3, 4. So plot that. Here's our vertex. A value, we know a is equal to -1. So since a is negative, we know the parabola is opening down. So here's our parabola. And then let's label everything. We've got -5, 0 here. We've got -1, 0. Our vertex is -3, 4. And we already labeled the axis of symmetry. All right, so I threw in something a little bit different here. So it says graph y equals 3 times x minus 4 squared. So you have to recognize this is not x-intercept form. This is vertex form, right? So this is actually in vertex form. Vertex form. So if it's in vertex form, just graph it the way I taught you when we were doing vertex form, okay? So you have to recognize different types of problems. Right, so this is not x-intercept form, vertex form. So if it's vertex form, we know our vertex is going to be 4, 0. Right, we take the opposite sign inside the parentheses, and there's no number outside here, so the k value would be 0. So here's our vertex, and we're going to sketch this now. So at 4, 0, we have our vertex. Now remember, when you're graphing using vertex form, once you have your vertex, then you use the a value to find one point to the right and one point to the left. Okay, so the a value is 3. That means you're going to move to the side one time, and then you're going to go up 3. Right? Move to the side one time, and then up 3. So, and there's our parabola. So remember, graphing using vertex form is actually easier than x-intercept form. Okay, and then they want us to label everything. Okay, so you notice here the x-intercept and the vertex, they're actually the same, right? The vertex of the graph and the x-intercept is actually the same, right? And that's possible, that can happen. The axis of symmetry, let's sketch that. Here's our axis of symmetry, and that's going to be x equals 4. Okay.